Thank you so much for listening to the It Starts with Attraction podcast today. My name is Jason. I'm one of the producers here on the podcast. I just wanted to give you a quick heads up. This episode does contain some explicit language. Don't click off. Don't let that turn you off. It is a great episode, and Layla gives some incredible advice, and she has a pretty incredible story as well. I just wanted you to have a heads up that there is some colorful language, though. So if you have kids in the car or you're playing it over your TV in the living room or in the kitchen, wherever, I just want to give you that heads up. So this is a great episode, and we hope you enjoy. And now, on to the episode.
Today on It Starts with Attraction, I am speaking with Leila Hormozi. For those of you who may not know Leila, man, she is a powerhouse of a woman. It was only 7 years ago that she started her first business on a whim with zero experience. And over the last 7 years, she has started and scaled 4 8-figure businesses. And some of those, maybe you've heard of, maybe not. GymLaunch, Acquisitioncom. She's married to Alex Hormozi. And over the past several years, as they've worked together as a couple, they have grown to a net worth of $100 million. Now, one of the things I really wanted to ask her, and you'll hear me ask her in our conversation, is how she has handled having all of this money and not tying her value or her self-worth into it. And I also ask her how she would define success. And one of the things I love about this interview is that you never hear her actually talk about the money. In fact, I even debated whether or not to mention their net worth or how monetarily or financial successful she has been in what she's done, because a lot of times we hear that and we label the person who has done that as being more successful or more quote unquote worthy than someone else who may not have the same number attachment that goes along with them. But the person is just as worthy. And you definitely hear Layla and realize in our conversation together that she's just a powerhouse of a woman and loves people. And she is seeking to fulfill a mission and make an impact more than anything else. Let's dive into today's episode with Leila Hormozi. Layla, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me on, Kimberly. I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm excited too. And Layla, there's probably going to be several people in our audience who have no idea how awesome you are yet, but they will by the end of our time together. Can you share your story, not just about what you do and now, but maybe start with what you do now, but how did you get to where you are now? Because you're a very influential, very successful woman, definitely someone to look up to, but it maybe hasn't always looked as perfect on the inside of what's going on as what people may see when they just see how successful you are. How did you get to where you are?
Yeah. I think it all started out when I was younger. If I look at really like the most, I would say like influential time in my life to get me on the path of where I am now, it was when I was 18. So, I think I was never like crazy smart or crazy motivated or any of that. I think I knew I was rebellious. And so I knew that I didn't want to conform. But that led to a lot of like adverse behaviors rather than productive ones. So, I think that you often go one of two ways when you're rebellious. It's like either that you like become the anomaly that like succeeds, or you like kind of fall flat because you just start doing a lot of unproductive stuff. And that's kind of where I ended up. I ended up getting arrested 6 times. I was just into drinking. I was into drugs. I ended up gaining a ton of weight. So I was overweight. I was getting arrested like every other week. At least that's what it felt like for that time being. And I was just like hanging out with people that were really unproductive. And I think it was because most of my life, growing up, I think that I did the opposite of what my parents wanted me to do. And this was like, as soon as I got out of high school, I think I acted that out even more. It was like all of a sudden the reins are off and I just kind of lost control of myself. And it took about, I want to say 18 months of just being in a really dark place, being very anxious and very depressed and feeling just like, is this really my life? Because I was also ashamed of what I was doing. It's not like I was doing all of this and proud of myself or thinking, oh yeah, sir, who am I? Nothing. Like I'm not showing anyone anything. I was just ashamed. And so it's like, I would drink and then I'd be ashamed that I drank. And then that would lead you to drink more. which leads you to get arrested. And then you're ashamed that you got arrested. So you drink more because you're ashamed. And then you're anxious to go out and not drink because people know in the community that you got arrested. So it's just like this ever spiraling effect. And it really stopped. And my trajectory changed after the 6th time I got arrested. And they ended up actually taking me to my parents' house because I still lived close by to where I grew up. And they took me to my parents' house and I woke up at my dad's and I was like, fuck. Like any teenage, whatever. I was 19 at the time, I think. And when they took me there in the morning, I was waiting for him to just be like, you're a piece of shit, get out of here or whatever. Because my dad, he's a very good father, but, he didn't tolerate that behavior. So I wasn't in the house at the time. Mm-hmm. And he just kind of sat me down. He was like, you can do whatever you want, but I just want to tell you, like, I really think you're just going to end up killing yourself if you keep doing this. And he said it in like such a matter of fact way of just like, you're going to eventually die. Like you're drinking enough, you're doing enough drugs. And he looked at me and I just remember like breaking down because, he's been such a fantastic father my whole life. And he was somebody I really respected. And I felt ashamed that I was who I was. And was even like sitting there with him, like completely hungover and looking like shit. And it was in that moment that I was like, I really need to do something about this. Like, this isn't who I want to be. Like, I knew I had a lot of potential and I was not utilizing it in any way. Like, I was never dumb. Did I ever get the best grades ever? No. It's because I didn't try hard enough. And I didn't have the motivation. And there's a lot you could go there about education in general. But that moment was really what changed the trajectory of my life. And so I just decided the next day, I was like, I am no longer this person. I'm done. Whatever bullshit there is about like, it takes so much time. No, there's no time. Today you are a new person. Like I was like, I don't drink. I'm not going to be fat anymore. I'm not going to overeat. I'm not hanging out with these losers. Like I was like, I'm done. I don't want to die. Like I want a big life. And I think I owe it to myself to show myself what I'm made of. And that was the day that I decided was the next day. I was like, I can't do this anymore. And so that was when I really set off on the journey of improving myself. I lost almost 100 pounds, like 85 pounds. Wow. I completely got sober and didn't drink. I got actually into a lot with like bodybuilding and powerlifting, just like in general, kind of replacing other activities with more healthy ones. I moved out of the house. I lived with like 6 friends and I moved out on my own. Even before I graduated college, I lived 2 years on my own because I just knew I didn't want to be around people who weren't trying to better themselves. And I just, traded all of the, going out and drinking all that with like studying and learning and being around people who, or being around nobody really at the time, just listening to people and learning from people online that I could. And it was that path that took me to California, which really, I graduated college with a degree in exercise science, and I knew I wanted to go into fitness business of some sort. Like I had said, I was always rebellious. And so I knew that I didn't want to have a traditional job. I knew that I wanted to try something on my own. I didn't know what it looked like. I knew at that point I wanted like some sort of business in the fitness space. And so I went to California. I thought, if I can make it work here, I can make it work anywhere. Because coming from Michigan, there's very little opportunity there. It's just a different scope of work. And remote work was not as popular back then. And so I moved out to California by myself. I drove my Prius across the country. And I had signed a lease from Craigslist that I found that was like the cheapest thing possible. And I told myself when I moved there, like, just map out all the gyms in the area and just apply to all of them. And so that's what I did. I just applied to every gym in the area. I ended up actually getting a job at all of them. And then I was like, well, which one do I want to work at? And it wasn't really like, what's the most aspirational place to work? It was like, we're going to make some fucking money because I'm about to go broke. Right. And so I ended up working at 24 Hour Fitness, worked my way up there, having never done sales before, never understanding how to get clientele, to having a completely full roster, and being very successful in sales. And I attribute that to the boss I had. He was a fantastic boss and really encouraging. So I got really lucky there. Not far after, I realized that I didn't think the corporate environment was conducive to what I wanted. I could only learn so much because everything was like kind of behind closed doors and like it's big corporation doing a lot, at headquarters, not on site. And so I took most of my clients and decided to go to a private gym where I basically took my clients that were my one-on-one training clients. And then I also trained clients like in class style there so that I could learn from the instructor or the owner of the facility, because I had heard he was like the best gym owner in the area. And so I went there and I was thinking, okay, I'm going to learn from this guy, like how to really run a small business. And I was about, I want to say like 8 months into working there. I learned a ton. He was a fantastic boss, fantastic leader. I learned a lot of what I wanted and a lot of what I didn't want, you know. The first lesson was like, it seems as hard to run a small business as a big one. So why not pick a big one?
Why not go the other way?
Yeah.
There's more zeros at the end of everything as opposed to the same issues with less zeros.
Totally. But it was there that then I met my now husband and business partner, Alex. We actually met on Bumble. So I was so like career oriented. I was only thinking about, you know, this is what I need to do to be successful. Like I was just, since that day with my dad, like I was just in the zone, and this was whatever, 4 years later. And I just like hadn't even looked up. I didn't care about relationships. I didn't care about any of that. I was just like, I want to be a better person. I want to be successful. I want to make money. I want to do my own thing. Like I want to do something to make my life worth living. And that was when I decided at one point, I was like, all right, well, I'm, 23. I'm like, I haven't even thought about like a spouse or a partner or anything. And I'd always thought I might get married around the age of 30 for some reason. I just like wanted to be established first. And then, I started thinking, well, kind of lonely, So I was like, it'd be nice to like at least go on dates and get to know somebody. And, even if I don't end up with them, like at least I have, companionship of some sort. So I started going on dates, and, Alex always tells me to clarify. I went on dates. I didn't sleep with people. So I went on a lot of dates. He's like, people just think you slept with people. I'm like, oh my God, I did not. So anyways, I went on a lot of dates. So about a year and a half, I actually went on a date a week because that was my commitment. I was like, I get it. It's like, it's actually funny. So I had the job in sales, and I was telling my manager, I'm trying to find somebody, et cetera, et cetera. And he's like, listen, this is a numbers game, just like here. He's like, you have to get X amount of appointments and X amount of sales. And I was like, and it made so much sense to me, like seriously. And so I was like, okay, I've just gotta, every day I'll do what I used to with leads, which is like my lunch break every day for 45 minutes. I'm just going to swipe, like crazy swipe on Bumble, because Bumble, the guys don't message you first. So it's like me messaging them. Right. I feel a little safer on there. So I got on there and I would just swipe, go on dates. Even if I wasn't sure how they were going to turn out, I was like, he told me, he was like, it's great practice for like business, like getting to talk to people that you don't know. He's like, that's a skill that most people don't have. And so I really just like embodied that. I was like, this is a skill I don't have. I'm going to learn through dating how to be a, better talker.
Get a bunch of free meals from it.
Yeah. Well, I actually offer to pay always, but that's just who I am. I think I came from like, I don't know. Even it's weird, right? When I dated people, even in high school, like I would pay every other time. I don't think it's as common now, but where I came
Did they
from,
let you? Were you like low key using that as a way to assess who you were going to pick?
No,
for the guy.
I just think it's kind of shitty that a guy has to pay for every date all the time. Like I wouldn't want to pay for every date. So I'm like, hey, so that was what I ended up doing. And then about a year and a half into it is when I met Alex. And the reason I think I was so intrigued was, what I always kept saying is like, I just want somebody who's like, no BS. Let's just get to it. Like, I don't need to talk to you on this app for another 7 days. Like, what are we talking about? I just hate that. I don't like small talk. I'm just not good at it. And so he was like, let's get off this app. I'm going to give you a phone call. The phone call can basically be the first date. And then from there, the first date's like the second date. And I was like, amazing. This guy's so efficient. I love it. And that was when I met him. And I'll tell you, 3 weeks into dating / knowing each other, if you could even call it dating, like whatever, hanging out, he kept saying like, you need to come work with me. I have this idea for this business. And he was in fitness. He had 6 gyms. He had this idea for this business called GymLaunch. And is basically where you would go to a facility, run the marketing that was working super well at his gyms, and then sell a bunch of members into it with, if you have sales aptitude, and then teach them how to retain the people on the back end. And he was like, what would be awesome is if you could do this too, because then it proves that it's not just me, like somebody else can do this. And I kept saying no in the beginning. And then eventually I was like, hey, what the fuck do I have to lose? I'm 23. Yes, I built up my clientele here, but I could do it again if it comes down to it. And, worst case scenario, I end up doing this and I have to just change plans and do something else. Like, I'm young, might as well do it now. And so I think it was about 4 weeks after meeting him that I got rid of all of my clients. I actually transitioned a lot of them online. I'll say that. Got rid of the rest of them, and then left my apartment, flew out to Virginia, and started launching gyms with this guy I met 4 weeks earlier on Bumble. Like, just went all into it. And then through that, through a series of many ups and downs, started our first business together called GymLaunch, which we sold about 1.5 years ago, along with Prestige Labs, which was a supplement line that we started through that business. And then we had also, after those, developed a software company that we sold. And then after we exited those 3 businesses, we started our current business, Acquisitioncom, which is a portfolio of companies that we basically go and we're a minority investor growth partner. So we take a minority stake in businesses and help them grow. I just sped up the last half of the story because I realized I was really taking a while there.
That's what this is about, understanding your story and where you've come from. Yeah. What question do I want to ask first? Let's start with this one. When you were doing GymLaunch, doing everything before what you're doing now, acquisitions.com, with what you're doing now, what was it like? And even what is it still like to work so closely with your husband? So I'm guessing you work well together because you've done it for so long, but do you feel like you are always talking about work at home, or do you have a balance with that? Like, what does your relationship look like?
Mm-hmm. Yes, we're talking about work all the time, and I love it.
Yeah.
I think that the frustration comes when you're both not on the same page. Mm-hmm. Before I met Alex, was all about work for those 4 years. And Alex was all about work before he met me. And then we came together and neither of us look at work as like, oh, it's like a part of, like, it's like we're on a mission and work is one way in which we express the mission. Our marriage is another way in which we express the mission. Like, we have a mission that we're on, and it doesn't feel like something that I need to turn off or turn on. Just like I don't turn off or turn on being a wife to him. And so for me, actually, in the very beginning, trying to turn it off was what caused so much frustration in our marriage. I think listening to all of these rules about only talk about business till 5, and then you have to have a date night, and then you have to do this. And if it works for somebody, I'm freaking do it. Do it. It didn't work for us. It was not just for who we are. I think it works for a lot of people, but for us, it's just never been the case. We love talking about work. We love what we do. So it's you want to tell me that we can't talk about the thing that we love together? You know what I mean? That we're working on together, just because it's a date night. I think it was arbitrary rules. And so for us, it was actually not adhering to a lot of the typical advice that you hear out there. In fact, a lot of the typical advice we tried to instill in the beginning just ended up making me, I was so stressed. The beginning was so stressful when we first got married because all these people had opinions about how to run your marriage, especially when you're working together. And I just realized so much of it is about understanding who I am and who Alex is and what we specifically want for ourselves in our life, and then contextualizing all the advice to that, which means often that a lot of it doesn't apply. Yeah. So what I will say is that the beginning of working together was hard as hell. I think people see it now and they're like, you guys are so good together. But we put in, I want to say 3 years of very, very, very hard, intentional, uncomfortable work. Because, we're both very strong personalities and we both are very driven people. Usually it just does this. And so if you want to be able to do this and take off like a rocket together, you have to really learn how to communicate and probably also not be selfish. I think it was really good for both of us in that way.
Yeah. What were some of the ways that you figured out how to understand him better? And for him, how did you help him understand you better so that you wouldn't fight as much and you would use your forces combined to be better instead of just antagonistically?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it was having enough self-awareness to realize that I wasn't as great at communicating as I thought I was, or at least not within the context of a relationship. I think that when emotions are high, intellect goes down. And therefore, most people act worse in a relationship than out of a relationship because emotions are high, right? There's like this pressure, there's emotions, there's love, whatever you want to call it. And I think that it was learning how to regulate emotions so that we could have the same kind of great communication in our relationship as we could, say, in the workplace. Because if you look at it, a lot of people are nicer to strangers or to people at work than they are to their spouse. And
absolutely.
Yeah, and I think in the beginning we felt that in that both of us have very high standards for ourselves. And so I was like, there would be times where like one of us would just like, probably feel really stressed about something or want to get angry. And it was like, why are we feeling this way? And I think a lot of it was just understanding that taking the skills outside of a relationship and bringing them into a relationship. Like if I'm able to communicate with a prospect, if I'm able to communicate with a friend, if I'm able to communicate with somebody else that works for me in a productive way, why can't I also do that with my spouse? And I think that being able to make that transfer of skills was very helpful for both of us. And I think, the second thing to that is one piece of advice that we got that has always served us very well is never have anything between you. So it's like the visual I have is always like me and Alex sitting on a couch. There's him and there's me. And most people have this wall of unsaid expectations, unmet expectations, resentment, all these things they've never told their spouse or they've never addressed with themselves that sit between you and your spouse. And we started our marriage off with, like, before we got married, we said, like, what are the things between us? And we just like listed them all out to each other. And they were like, let's address these one by one. And it was a very uncomfortable conversation. Like, I did not like having it at all. I remember being like, just like very emotional, like almost shaking, because it's like, you're just trying to think of all the things that you haven't said to the person or you feel, or you're worried about, or all these things. But man, did that clear the way for a great relationship, because it set the tone that we don't keep things between each other. We are completely honest, transparent. If we have an inkling of discomfort around something in our relationship, we say it to each other. And I think that's such a gift to give each other, because, most people just like live in this relationship where like their best friend knows more about their marriage than their fucking husband does, Yeah.
Can you tell us about a time where you and Alex went through something very hard in your relationship or in your marriage, and how you got through it?
I mean, I think that a lot of the harder times came in the beginning for us, probably even before we were married. I think as we were married, growing the business, but there's a few times I can think of. I think the first hardest thing to go through was when Alex got a DUI, because for me, that was very scary, because I grew up in an alcoholic family. And so I remember my mother getting a DUI, and I like brought back all these memories for me that I had associated with DUI. And, I think that was a really great moment, because in that moment I was like, and ironically enough, we had broken up 2 months before that. And then, because I just felt like everything was like, I felt like he was very distant. This is when we were just dating. And then I said to him, do you want to break up? Like, I literally just said it like that. Like one day we're like sitting in the office. And I was like, do you want to just like break up? He was like, yeah. And I was like, okay, I thought so. Like, that was it.
And you were still working together? Like, you continued working together after that?
Yeah. So we kept working together. And then 6 weeks later, he was like, hey, like, I feel like it's just, I'm in this weird spot, but like, I don't want to not be together. And I was like, I get it. Like, you're going through like a lot. He had lost a lot. He had a business partner that stole from him. There was a lot that he was going through. And then, he had like an event that he was invited to with his family, and he drove there. And then when he was there, he was drinking, and then on the way back got a DUI. And I think that moment, it was kind of the reverse, where I was like, I can't, if this happens again, like, I don't know if I can do this. And he was like, this will not happen again. And I think that I think Alex and I both have enough respect for each other that we understand that just because you're someone's spouse or partner, you don't abuse that. Like, I've never felt like, oh, I could treat Alex like shit and he won't go anywhere. I'm like, no, he could leave my ass. Like, and I think that, and I could leave his ass. It's like, we were both really great people. Like, I mean, like, he's a catch. I think I'm a catch. So I'm like, and I think that a lot of people don't think about themselves that way, or their partner. They think like, oh, this person should tolerate all my shit. And I've never thought about it that way, or felt like, because somebody's my spouse, and he doesn't think that either. He's always like, we have enough respect and admiration for each other that we're like, you don't deserve me to treat you like that. And so I think that has been something that served us really well, is just, treating each other how we would want to be treated, and always trying to be a source of positive encouragement and reinforcement for each other rather than negative, because I think a lot of people are negative. And I think in the beginning, you're learning and testing things out, and you're also understanding where people draw the line and boundaries. But we also were both very cognizant to each other's. Like, we didn't have to, Alex doesn't have to say much for me to know if he doesn't like something I said to him, and I don't have to say much for him to know that I'm upset with something. And it's like, we also are self-aware enough to know if either one of us is being unreasonable. So it works well. The second hardest time was probably having a disagreement. So, there was a time where we didn't agree on the direction in a company. And it was the only time that we moved forward in our whole marriage. We always say, if we don't agree, we don't move forward. But we moved forward not agreeing. And I think it was a big lesson for us, because it was basically, are we going to build this software company or not? And I said, no, I think it's stupid. And he was like, I think you're stupid. He didn't say that, but that was essentially the argument, right? It's like, well, I want to do it and you don't. I think that I'm much more mature now, in that back then, I think I just kind of ended up caving. I think it was like, there was like 2 days that we literally just spent in a room together, like just going back and forth on what we should do. And I eventually caved, even though I just felt so wrong about the decision. And I just said, I just went along with it. And I think what that really taught me, after looking back on that, because I promised myself I would never do that again, was how important it is to find your voice in your marriage and in your partnership. Because I really think that I did him a disservice as his business partner, of not figuring out a way to better communicate my point of view so that he could understand where I was coming from. And I also think that that's not what a lot of people say. I think that most of the time it's like, I see a lot of business partners blame each other. Well, my husband wanted to do this, so, he just steamrolled me. It's like, how about you don't act like a victim, and you take responsibility for the decision that you allowed? And me taking responsibility for that decision and not advocating better for myself was like one of the best, I think, things that I could have done in the relationship, because, I just don't see a way in which two strong people can work together productively if one of them actively will, not advocate for themselves. Like, you both have to be able to equally.
Yeah. I love that. Earlier, you were talking about how growing up, especially after you made the decision that you were no longer going to be that person, and when you were 18 years old and you just changed, and you said you wanted to be successful. What do you define as success?
I think success in my mind is not just money. It's having the relationships you want, the body you want, the friendships you want, and the business you want. I've never really truly looked up to people who only have one. I want to be able to do all of it. And I think that is much harder, because I think it's a lot easier to be an extremist and have, I know a lot of people who have a ton of money, but they're also there's coke falling out of their fucking eyes, and they have 6 girlfriends and they're depressed. Right. And so I think for me, it's always looked like that. It's being able to succeed in all facets of life that makes someone want to keep living. I don't like using the word happy, but I think wanting to continue on with life and looking forward to it is what I've always wanted to aim for. And I think if you want to have a life that you look forward to, then you can't ignore any one facet of it. I think that they're all symbiotic.
What does your day-to-day look like? So how do you, I'm guessing I know actually, you're still into fitness. You run a business, you're a wife, you do entrepreneurial type things, not philanthropy as well. And so how do you manage all of that?
Team. I mean, I have help everywhere. You know what I mean? Like, it's like people are always like, you must be so busy. I'm like, I mean, I'm busy because I choose to be. I like being busy. I'm naturally like you even see in my dad, like my dad is like a fast moving, like always wants to be doing stuff. I'm the same way. I like doing stuff. I like activity. I like high activity and I like high output, but I don't have to by any means. I think I often try to like even distract myself with more things. So I don't like fuck with the business too much because I need the activity. It's like I have an assistant team that helps me, with the house and with personal things. And then I also have assistants that help us with the work. And then, I have a functional head for every department. And so, all of those things I look at as my job is, looking forward to the future of the business, innovating the current day business, and then leading the people throughout that journey. That's what I think that I need to be doing. Getting in the weeds of any one function, I do as needed. That you have to do as a business owner, but you can't do it on a consistent basis. Most of my time is spent with the team. So if I had to say, like, what does my time look like? Like, most of my time is spent talking to the leaders, interacting with the team. Even this weekend there's a team here. So like take the team to dinner, go to the gym with the team, like spend as much time possible with the people on the team, investing in them, investing in the relationships. And then talking to them about, their initiatives, the challenges they're running up against, what they want, how's life going? Like, that's where I spend most of my time. So most of my time is spent talking to other people. And, I have plenty of friends that I talk to throughout the week, or I would say like advisors and mentors as well, that there's conversations here and there. But that's a lot of my week. Now, I would say the other thing that I spend a lot of time doing is looking at deals, looking at companies that we're considering bringing on, researching them, calling up people that are experts in a piece of the company that maybe I don't understand. I was doing that this morning. Doing market research, running background checks if you need to, like learning about the deals that come on our plate, because it's all in the pick. And so spend a lot of time trying to figure out if we should pick a company or not. That's probably like the second biggest chunk of time. And then, to that, I would say like there's content and stuff like this that I do as well.
Did you say you work out with your team?
Yeah, like we'll go to the gym with them.
You go, like, is this something you do you have given me an idea that my team is not going to love, but I think it's brilliant. So
Oh, that's cool. Well, I'll say when we ran GymLaunch, every time we had team meetups and we had the team in town, we all went to the gym together every day. And I would run the girls through a workout and I would lead it. And, they would be sore as fuck after. It was great.
Yes.
Here, if people are in town or people are around, we all like the ones that live in the vicinity, the ones I know like to work out, we'll say like, hey, we're going to the gym. If you guys want to come, like hop in, ride with us there. I don't think I'm like working out with a big group of dudes, but I go to the gym at the same time with them. And if, any of the ladies are in town, then that's a little more appropriate because, I'm not like pushing 4 plates on a squat.
Yeah. Yeah. How are you handling remote work? So do you have like part of your team that's there in the Las Vegas area where you live now and everyone else is remote? How do you keep your culture healthy in a hybrid or fully remote environment?
Yeah, I've been fully remote, or was like completely remote for 6.5 years. The only part of our team that's, here in Vegas is our media team, because it's a little hard to record people remotely. And so, we've had the initiative for a while, like we want to build out a headquarters here for the media where we can have like our studios and we can record, and then we can have offices in there so they can get more like real life content of what we do on a daily basis. So that's been the biggest initiative that we've had there. We haven't found an office yet. So if anyone listening to this has an office in Vegas that you feel like giving to me, I'd love it.
That'd be fantastic.
Yeah, that would be great. Just fall into my lap. But, in terms of, I think that, running a remote company has been something I've done for so long. I actually have never run a company in person. When people get together in person, I'm like, God, this is easy. You know, if it were in person, it would be so easy, because I think, you know, the skills it takes to influence people and influence an organization in person are less than how much it takes remotely. You have to really be intentional remotely to build a culture.
So much.
You know, you have to be able to figure out ways to manufacture organic conversations that you would be having if you had an in-person office. But then I will say, on the other side, I think it takes a person with different like proclivities. I think that if you want people to work remotely, you need people who have more, I would call like free agency, like more autonomy, and more ability to self-regulate, because you're not there to regulate them on a consistent basis. And so I think a lot of companies fail at the pick. They pick people who need to be highly regulated, highly watched. They need a lot of direction. And I actually just think those people are probably better suited to have a job in person. And so that's the biggest piece of advice that I give to people when they're recruiting and they're trying to build a remote culture, is it's always going to be an uphill battle if you don't pick the right kind of people from the get-go.
It's similar to what you were saying about the deals that you look at, right? It's at the pick. In any kind of investment, so much of the success of it and how it's going to be happens when you buy it, and the state of it when you buy it. And so I can totally see how that applies to the kind of person that you hire, which makes total sense. So another question I want to ask you is, many people know you or know Alex, especially in the sense of how, like, the escalation of how monetarily and financial successful y'all have been over the years. And so one of the questions I wanted to ask is, how do you not let money be how you find your worth or how you find your value? How do you, or do you feel like you do a good job being able to separate the hundreds of millions of dollars from you and your value as a person?
Yeah, I think actually something that's probably surprising is, like, I'm not incredibly money focused. Like, that's always actually been why we're a great balance. It's because I don't, it's like, sometimes I have to think about it more. But I'm always of the thought, Kimberly, that if you don't focus on it, it will come. Like, I know that sounds stupid, but if I do right by my team, if I pick the right companies and I grow those companies and I do the basics well, then we will make, I'm sure, a shit ton of money. Now, in terms of like tying my worth to money, like, I think people like any numbers that go up. People get addicted to the money. People get addicted to social media. People get addicted to gambling. Like, I think anything where your actions are tied to a number that continues to go up and up and up when you do a thing, people get like addicted to, quote, quote, and then like they tie their worth to it, is what people like to say. I get a lot more reinforcement from watching the growth of people on my team than I do from money. So, like, you know, I tell the story a lot of, you know, we had one of like our record months in GymLaunch, and I hated the business because I didn't feel good about the team. And if I'm not surrounded by people I like and I'm not doing things I like, I'm not happy no matter how much money I'm making. And so I think that for me, at least, like, very quickly, I mean, like, listen, I don't think I ever thought that money was going to make me happy, but I definitely realized that that was for sure true when I had a shit ton of money, and I was like, it doesn't make a difference. I think that money can buy you a lot of inconveniences. Like, you can surpass a lot of inconveniences with money, which can remove a lot of like low levels of stress that people have. Like, oh, I don't need to fly on a normal plane, so I don't have to like sit in the line for 3 hours, like all these things. But like, am I like, yeah, I'm so happy for these millions of dollars, like licking them in bed? Like, I just like,
I hope not. It doesn't sound sanitary.
It's just a piece of paper, you know? And I'll say the next thing, which is, I don't even think I have a lot of money. Like, I know that sounds ridiculous, but listen to this. Like, when I am here and I'm talking to people who are building hospitals and buying cities, I have nothing compared to those people. I'm just like starting. So I don't even identify with having a lot of money at this point, because the people that I'm talking to are making billions in income per year, and I'm talking about even just getting to a billion, I'm like a little baby when they talk to me. They're like, well, it's really cute, Layla, And, when I see the utility of money at that scale, that I could build schools, I could build cities, we could build hospitals. I mean, like, that's the kind of money that I would like to get to, because I understand the utility of having a lot. I don't want to have a lot so I can buy a Chanel purse. Like, it's like, all the things like cars and houses and like those things like have a very low utility. The reason I want more money and still do is because I understand I know how to use it. And I see the ways in which people who have a large impact on the world use it. And I would like it to be able to use it in that way to make the world better. Not because like I can already get most everything I want at this point. So it's like, yeah, it's just really interesting. I think that if people tie their self-worth to money, they'd perpetually be disappointed, because the moment that you meet someone with more money, you just feel like a piece of shit,
Yeah. What is the impact that you want to make on the world? What legacy are you hoping to make?
I want to build Acquisition.com into $1 billion firm using praise and not punishment. Like,
wow.
For the last 7 years that I have built companies, people have always said, like, what is it that you're doing differently that's like made this culture so great? Like, how are you able to retain these people and get this talent, do all this stuff? And I haven't been able to put words to it until probably in the last few months, which is when I realized like that is something worth building. Because if we can build and hit the billion, people will listen to me no matter what, right? They'll say, well, how did you do that? And I can finally tell them, well, it's not by being an asshole. Because I think so many people sacrifice their values to hit a number objectively, to get their company to a certain number. But I'm like, I look at it and I think John Mackey talks about this as like win, win, win. How can you, with every decision in your business, create a win for the customer, a win for the employees, a win for the environment, a win for the business? And I look at Acquisition.com as a vehicle for me to exemplify that in a way that specifically is not just, neutral to employees, but benefiting them and helping them win while we win. And I think that in the traditional world of PE, I'm actually quite anti-PE, because I think most things that they do, you pay people enough so they never want to leave, but they hate their lives. You exploit business owners because they're ignorant to understanding how you value their businesses. And then you get their businesses from them and they realize later that they could have gotten like 10 times more money. And then you treat people within the company very poorly because they're not going to leave. And you treat the businesses very poorly because now the business owner has sold it to you, they're gone, and now you can finally rip out the cash and not actually even grow it, just use it as an investment. Yeah. And so I look at this as I would love to take Acquisition.com to $1 billion and $10 billion, doing it in the complete opposite way. Like I want to defy all the rules of this industry that we've entered and show people that it's absolutely possible, because I know it is. It's already working. But it's like I just need time.
Yeah. How long have you been doing Acquisition.com, and where are you to your goal now?
Yeah. Oh, so far away from our goal. We're like 200 million in portfolio revenue. And so,
I mean, listen, you're what, 20% there?
Yeah, I don't, I guess there's so many, I've never been like, is it $1 billion in portfolio revenue or $1 billion in?
Oh, yeah. How are you evaluating the $1 billion?
Yeah, because like most of the time when people say I'm a billionaire, it's like made up from air and paper, right? It's not even like they don't have $1 billion. So yeah, I'm talking about the value of our holdco to be worth $1 billion or 10 billion.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely had some luck. I think an illusion that a lot of people have is like, must be so many businesses in there, but like there's portfolio theory, which is like understanding that like 10% of the businesses or investments you make are going to make up 80% of the portfolio. So it's really just like taking good chances and then waiting for a few of them to pan out in a very big way.
Yeah. So if there are people listening who may be interested, saying, I have a company, I love what Layla's saying, I want to know more. So how does Acquisition.com work with businesses, and how can they apply to find out if it would be a good fit to work with you?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you, I mean, if you don't want to sell a minority in your business, do not apply, because that's what we do. We buy stake in businesses and then we partner with them to grow. So I think a common misconception is they're like, people will think, is that consulting? It's not consulting. We're a true growth partner. So we're here to basically help the businesses achieve maximum growth. That first starts with organic growth, growing out all the functions, growing the business organically. And then at some point, looking at using our deal flow to acquire other businesses underneath that entity. So, if people feel like they would like more help growing their business and are really serious about doing so, we're looking for people who aren't just trying to make money. They're trying to make money, but also really trying to make an impact. The companies that do the best are the ones where the founders are really mission driven. They're really trying to make a difference in some way, shape, or form in the world, in their community, in their industry. And those are the businesses that we want to work with, market leaders.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then do you do any kind of like mastermind for female CEOs? Because that would be amazing.
I do not.
I'm not going to say you should, but I wish that it existed.
I appreciate it a lot. It's really flattering. I like that. Would that be super fun? Yes, I would love to do something like that. I'm just really disciplined with what I say yes and no to. And I'm like, right now I'm full CEO Acquisitioncom. Let's grow this thing. I mean, I think there's like a fallacy too, because we grew these other businesses to be big and successful and made a lot of money, but like, I'm still like the day-to-day Acquisition.com leader. So, and it's it's only not even 2 years old. So I'm just right now, it's not in the cards.
I hear you. Well, it is always, this is the first time I've spoken to you, but I've heard you speak before. I heard you speak actually at Traffic and Conversion Summit last year. You were talking about a hiring process and it was really good. And our marketing team has implemented it and used parts of it. So thank you for that. And that was a big thing in your talk. You're like, you aren't going to do this. So many of you aren't actually going to do this. And I thought it's true because you go to things like that and you get a lot of great information and then you go home and realize you spent $20,000 to take your team out there and literally implemented zero of it.
That's pretty funny. Yeah. I also was like, I got asked to talk about hiring at a marketing place and I was like, oh, fuck, this stuff. Like, who's going to do this?
You did. And you did a great job. And you were wearing a really awesome blouse when you did it. So
thank you.
Either way, it was great speaking with you. For people who want to know more or follow you, are you on social media? How can people connect more about what you're doing?
Yeah. All social media at Leila Hormozi. And you can also go to acquisition.com. If you're interested in becoming or in understanding what it means to be a portfolio company, you can apply. But we also have this thing on there called Mozi Talent, which is my special project, which is a page where we talk about the career openings in our portfolio. And if people, sign up there, they get emails with, just like insights I have every week or so, as well as they get first dibs at applying to a job at one of either Acquisition.com or a portfolio company. So those are the few ways that they can connect. And then I have a podcast called Build that you can get on Spotify or iTunes.
Awesome. Fantastic. Well, thank you, Leila. It was great speaking with you today, and I very much appreciate your time.
Thanks, Kimberly.
Here are my key takeaways from today's episode. I told you were going to love this conversation. I really enjoyed talking with Leila and getting to know more about her story. My first takeaway and how it applies to us is she made a decision to change who she was because she didn't want to be that person anymore. And she just decided and did it. How impacting and powerful is that to hear and to realize that a lot of times maybe we give ourselves too much slack when there's something about our lives that we're wanting to change, but we just say, well, it's gonna take time. Are we really just giving ourselves a free pass? Are we really just making excuses to continue to not make the hard decision and do the hard things in order to be the person that we want to become? I love the fact that she brought that up and that takeaway to dig deep and really ask ourselves, who is it we want to be? And what am I doing now that's not allowing me to move forward, to become that person? My second key takeaway from this episode is how important communication is in your relationship. I actually love that she and Alex talk so much about business and that they work together. And she's right. A lot of relationship experts out there would say it's not healthy. You should separate work from home. But in reality, especially for people who are business owners and founders, that's such a huge part of who they are. And so to not talk about work at home is not sharing a deep and personal part of you with your spouse. I talk about work all of the time with my husband. Sometimes I give him hourly updates. He is my sounding board. He is the person that I go to ask for advice. Like, he might not be on the payroll at the companies that I work for and run, but he is absolutely a huge part of what allows me to make the impact that I make at Marriage Helper. And that's part of who we are. That's part of our dynamic. So I believe it's important to be there with your family and turn off working. But if the thing that you are passionate about and both of you enjoy is talking about a mission or a legacy that you're trying to build together, and that happens to look like work, then absolutely that shouldn't be off limits. I love that she said that. My third key takeaway from the episode is when she talked about how a lot of times people have a wall between them and their spouse. That's actually even the terminology that we use at Marriage Helper to talk about the kind of the bricks that we put up between us and another person in order to protect us, or in order to kind of paint a picture on the other side of those bricks of the person we think they want us to be. But either way, it's leading to a chasm in the relationship, a moat, a castle in between the two people that is keeping them from being fully intimate. And so it is a great thing to ask yourself, what are the expectations that I haven't stated to my spouse or to my kid or to whatever kind of relationship you're in, that because they aren't being met, I've become frustrated, I've become resentful. And maybe ask yourself, is maybe it because you didn't state the expectation, or you didn't say it in such a way that it helped the person understand why it meant so much to you, and not, of course, saying it in a way where it feels attacking or anything like that to the other person. But just having this concept of there's going to be honesty, there's going to be transparency. This is something Rob and I do as well. I mean, to the point where anytime I feel like I need or want to keep a secret from him is the minute I know I need to tell him. And I've talked about that in the podcast before, especially when it comes to if there's another man who said something to me that I felt weird about. Of course, I'm going to tell my husband. But even if I had an interaction where I felt like someone was flirting with me, or maybe I even felt like I was beginning to become attracted to someone else, I tell my husband. And that shocks some people. And there's been a whole episode where I talked more in depth about that. But that's how we stay honest and open. And it takes away any temptation from me. And same with him. And so I love, like, whatever a wall might be, how can we work together to bring it down for there to be true intimacy and vulnerability in the relationship? I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please share it with a friend that you think would find it helpful for them. And as always, would love if you would leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. It helps the podcast reach even more people. Until next week, stay strong.